What's up, all my drivers out there? So I'm currently traveling. I'm in Massachusetts, hence the weird angle, but wanted to film this video. This is a question I've been asked surprisingly a lot, both from drivers or aspiring drivers and from just people when they find out, I'm a driver for Lyft and Uber. And that is, can you make, or is it possible to make $100,000 a year or more as a rideshare driver? The answer is it's possible, but I don't know how probable it is. I definitely think it's possible. Like, for example, if someone came to me and said, hey, Mark, I'm going to do a bet with you. If in the next year you make over $100,000 a year as a driver, you get $1 million bonus. I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm taking that bet. I can definitely do it. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of grinding, and I'm probably going to hate driving after that year, but it is possible. Now, doing the math out, you have to make, in order to make $100K in a year, you have to make $274, roughly, $274 a day. Now, doing the math out, that equals $11.42 an hour every hour. Breaking it down, though, let's be realistic a little bit. As a driver, let's say, look, I'm going to go all out. I really want to make $100K in a year. And let's say you're like, okay, I'm going to do 12 hours a day. It's going to be grueling, but that gives you time at least to, obviously go to the bathroom, eat, maybe work out or hang out with people if you can when driving. It's going to be a bit of a hectic year. That means if you're going to drive 12 hours in a day, you have to make $22.83 an hour. If you make $22.83 an hour, 12 hours every day for 365 days, you will make over $100,000 a year as a driver. Now, is that realistic? Breaking it down in terms of the math, is it realistic to make $22.83 an hour, 12 hours a day for 365 days in a year? Overall, it depends. Now, this video could go in a bunch of different directions, but I'm going to sum it up like this. A lot of my dedicated subscribers probably know what I'm about to say, but I got to say it. The number one factor that determines how much money you can make as a driver is your location. Now, breaking it down, Rideshare did a survey. They do this every year, but talking about the 2020 numbers, they found that the average driver made $19.36 an hour. The average driver. So if you think about it, that's less than the $22.83. And that is why the number one factor that really determines how much money you can make as a driver is your location. And this can be unfortunate. For example, New York City had the highest amount in the country. The average that the drivers made was $26.24 an hour. So if you're in New York City, making $100K as a driver is feasible, especially if you factor into a lot of tips, the bonuses that Lyft and Uber is giving to a lot of drivers right now, any kind of incentives, like say there's crazy events going on. It is a lot easier to make $100K as a driver in New York City than, like, say, a state like Florida. In Florida, the average amount for the state was $12.90 an hour for drivers. Now, granted, remember, it is for the state of Florida. I guarantee that Miami, you could make a lot more money than a remote part in Florida. And I even have a lot of Miami drivers comment on this channel saying, hey, Mark, I live in Miami. I actually make great money driving for Lyft and Uber. However, though, it still stands that overall, your location really is the number one factor. And that's why I say there's a lot of different factors that really can determine this. But overall, breaking it down, yes, it is possible to make $100,000 or even more than $100,000 a year as a driver. I've heard of drivers making above six figures in San Francisco. Granted, this is a few years ago when it was that popular. I saw even some articles being like, wow, a good amount of drivers were actually making over six figures. They were killing it when driving. San Francisco was an amazing place to drive years ago. Over time, unfortunately, the amount that you can make as a Lyft and Uber driver has gone down a lot. And with the way that the path is going, it could be that even in the future, in the years to come, you make less and less of a driver. So it could be that this video in 5 years' time might be like, no, you can't make that much. But for right now, it is very feasible to make a lot of money. I still get so many comments on this channel of people telling me like, Mark, I make amazing money driving for Lyft and Uber. I don't do anything else. One thing I will say though as a side note, and I'll probably do a separate video about this, is the difference between driving part-time and full-time is massively different. The second that I went from part-time to full-time, and again, there's a lot of different reasons why, but the second I went from part-time to full-time, a lot of things changed for me. Hate to say it in more of a bad way. You know, I mean, a lot of different factors. And overall, one thing I want to say is that Lex, you are watching this video and you're like, yo, look, you know, Mark, if I can make $100K in a year, it might be a bad year in terms of me driving that aggressively, trying to do whatever I can and you know, busting my butt, trying to make as much money. Maybe I should. And you are driving part-time. I promise you, going from part-time to full-time, a lot of gears shift and a lot of things change. Again, I'll probably do a separate video on that, but that is one thing I want to say, because obviously, as you can imagine, could you make $100,000 a year driving Lyft and Uber part-time? No. Absolutely not. Like, you have to go all in. Now, granted, maybe you get really lucky and you hit a bunch of surge pockets. I mean, the most I ever made as a driver when I was driving in Boston, because the rates were ridiculous then, especially when it would snow and the T would break down, which is the public transportation. I mean, I was making close to 60 an hour sometimes, but even still, those are only a few hours in the day. It was only the morning commutes because people had to get to work. And the evening commutes, people were like, well, I'm not in a rush to get back home. Theoretically, by that point, hopefully the T was fixed or repaired or whatever. So it was really only in the morning. It was only for a few hours I could really make 60 an hour. But overall, and I said this before in other videos, my average was roughly about $20 to $25 an hour, give or take what was going on when I was driving. Friday and Saturday nights, I'd say I bumped that up to about 30 to 35 an hour, which is great. But remember, it's only during those peak hours. Another factor to consider is also the minimum hourly guarantees. Some states now, like California, are saying, hey, depending on how long you drive or how short you drive, it doesn't matter. If you don't make the minimum hourly guarantee that's put in place by Lyft and Uber, they will pay that up. And that's great, but it's not $22.83 an hour. So overall, there are a lot of different factors, and I know I'm going on so many different side tangents, but overall, yes, you can definitely make over $100,000 a year or $100,000 a year as a driver. But one, your location is going to be the number one factor that really determines how easy or difficult it is. If, let's say, you would take two drivers, one in Florida, one in New York City, they drove the exact same, the New York City driver would just have a way better time making a lot of money. But two, if you put in that work and if you hustle and you're hitting those, you know, you're putting those hours in, you're driving like crazy, you're doing, like I said, like say 12 hours every day for an entire year straight, it is definitely possible. It might be improbable because it can be a lot of work, it's very difficult, but it's definitely possible to crack over 6 figures.